fog clung to the ancient pines like memory that refused to fade. Evelyn Massey paused to catch her breath, 4 days into her Appalachian trail hike. Something had felt wrong since sunrise, a persistent sense of being watched. The snapping twig came from behind her left shoulder, too deliberate, too close. When she turned, the creature stood barely 3 feet tall, its leathery skin the color of wet bark. Not a child, not human. Its eyes reflected the dying light like polished copper pennies. It smiled at me. She would later tell the park ranger, voice trembling weeks afterward. And then it spoke. It knew my name. By morning, her campsite was circled with small, bare footprints. Her pack had been methodically emptied, each item examined and precisely returned. Nothing taken, nothing damaged. Just a message carved into the dirt. Leave. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Hills. The Great Smoky Mountains span more than 500,000 acres of ancient forest and mist-shrouded peaks. They're America's most visited national park, but the locals know a different mountain range, one where the veil between worlds grows thin in forgotten places. For centuries, people have spoken of the little people dwelling within these hills. The Cherokee called them the Yunwi Tsunsti, small beings who could either help or harm. European settlers brought their own traditions of gnomes and dwarves. The stories merged, but never disappeared. What's curious is the consistency in descriptions across generations and cultures. Small humanoid figures, usually between 2 and 4 feet tall, weathered skin like bark or stone, unnaturally quick movements, intelligence behind those eyes, not animal awareness, but something cunningly human, even ancient. My grandfather wouldn't talk about them directly, says Carolyn Whitaker, whose family has lived near Klingman's Dome for 7 generations. He'd say, the Watchers, or the Old Ones. He lost 2 hunting dogs to them in '63, found them with their necks broken, laid out side by side, facing east. Perfect line. No animal does that. Early accounts describe them as mischievous but largely benevolent spirits, but something has changed. Modern encounters carry a darker tone, and they're becoming more frequent. Chapter 2. The Trail That Vanished. October 2018. David Chen was an experienced hiker documenting his Appalachian Trail journey on YouTube. His final video showed him discussing his planned route before his expression suddenly changed. "Do you hear that?" he asks, voice lowered. The audio captures nothing unusual, just ambient forest sounds. Chen steps away, returning visibly shaken. "Someone's out there," he says, scanning the tree line. "I thought it was kids at first, but I'm going to pack up. Something doesn't feel right." The video ends. Chen was reported missing 3 days later. Search teams found his campsite intact, tent pitched, sleeping bag unrolled, half-prepared food still on his camp stove. But the trail Chen had been following, a clearly blazed section of the Appalachian Trail, simply stopped. Where maps showed a continuation, search teams found impenetrable thicket, as if that section had never existed. 8 months later, a day hiker found Chen's boots neatly paired at the base of a hollow tree 4 miles away, stuffed with fresh chestnuts and pine needles arranged in a spiral pattern. Chen himself was never found. Chapter 3. Eyes in the Hollow. Sarah Matheson was collecting botanical samples near Cades Cove when her audio recorder captured something disturbing. "There's someone watching me from the tree line. Multiple. I don't think they're human. God, their eyes. If anyone finds this recording, I'm approximately 2 miles northeast of the Abrams Falls trailhead. Something's very wrong here. 3 minutes of running footsteps follow. Heavy breathing. Then Sarah's voice again. They're hurting me, cutting me off whenever I try to head back to the trail. They're working together. The recording continues with strange, chittering noises, unlike any known wildlife, and Sarah's final words. Please, I'll leave. I'll never come back. Just let me go. Sarah emerged from the forest 5 days later, severely dehydrated and disoriented, claiming she'd simply gotten lost. But the dirt under her fingernails contained an unknown organic compound, and the scratches on her ankles were determined to have been made by hands, small hands, with surprising strength. Chapter 4. The Collector. Elijah Townsend has gathered accounts of gnome encounters in Appalachia for over 30 years. His Gatlinburg home houses filing cabinets of handwritten letters, recorded interviews, and digital evidence. People trust me because I don't tell them what they saw, Townsend explains. I just listen. And after hundreds of stories, the patterns become impossible to ignore. His categorization system divides encounters into 3 types: observational encounters, glimpses from a distance; interactive encounters, engagement through rearranged belongings or strange tokens left behind; and most disturbing, territorial encounters, aggressive actions to drive humans away. It's the territorial type that's increasing, Townsend says, showing a map marked with colored pins. The densest clusters correspond with locations where new developments have been proposed or mining companies have conducted surveys. They've always been guardians, he says quietly. Maybe they're responding to new threats. Chapter 5. Viral Darkness. In December 2022, a TikTok video posted by hiker Zoe Manning showed a small figure darting between trees with unnatural fluid movements, ending with a clear frame of reflective eyes staring directly at the camera. The video accumulated 7 million views before Manning removed it after receiving dozens of threatening messages from anonymous local numbers claiming to be concerned for her safety. This sparked a wave of similar videos, many obviously fake, but some contained details that matched patterns in Townsend's archives with uncanny precision, details never made public. Like Reddit user AppTrailThrough72's account of finding his backpack emptied each night during a week-long hike, items arranged geometrically with strange gifts left behind, perfect spheres carved from river stone, impossible craftsmanship, and they were warm to the touch. Or username Mossy Hollow, describing increasingly aggressive encounters near Cosby, Tennessee. They've started taking things from inside the house now. Last night the locks were still engaged, but my grandmother's silver was arranged in a spiral on the kitchen floor. Her final update simply read, "They spoke last night. Not English, not Cherokee, but I understood. This is their place. They've been patient. That patience is ending." The account was deleted the next day. Attempts to locate the user have been unsuccessful. Chapter 6. The Cherokee Knowledge. "We never called them gnomes," says Robert Youngblood, a Cherokee elder whose ancestors avoided removal by hiding deep in the mountains. "But we've always known about the Yunwi-Tsunsdi, the little people. The Cherokee stories describe beings that could heal the sick, guide the lost, or punish those who disrespected the natural world. They were never considered supernatural," Youngblood clarifies. "Just another kind of people sharing these mountains with us. Different, but as real as deer or bear." Traditional Cherokee understood there were places the little people claimed as their own, sacred spaces where humans were not welcome. Our people knew better than to build there, to hunt there. We respected boundaries, Youngblood says, but those boundaries aren't marked on your government surveys or property deeds. When asked about recent aggressive encounters, he grows solemn. The mountains have endured much. Mining, logging, now these massive resorts. The little people have always defended their territory, but they had space to retreat before. Where do they go now when every hollow becomes a subdivision? He pauses. There's an old story about a time when the little people declared war on encroaching settlers. It didn't end well for either side. I pray we're not seeing history repeat itself. Chapter 7. Government Silence. The National Park Service officially dismisses gnome encounters as wildlife misidentification, pranks, or mental health episodes. But internal communications tell a different story. A Freedom of Information Act request revealed dozens of heavily redacted reports describing unusual findings, small humanoid footprints in remote areas, campsites methodically rearranged overnight, and most tellingly, certain areas within park boundaries that rangers themselves were instructed to avoid after sunset. Former Park Service employee Thomas Blackburn confirmed that rangers received specific training on how to respond to Category F incidents, unexplained phenomena that might cause public concern. We were told to document, but not escalate, Blackburn explains. Certain reports went directly to a special division in Washington. We never heard what happened after that. More concerning are the land survey anomalies. Geological maps from the 1950s show several small valleys and cave systems that no longer appear on modern maps. When questioned, officials cited mapping technology improvements. But the coordinates of these vanished locations correlate with areas where gnome encounters have been most frequently reported. Whatever dwells in these mountains, someone in authority has been systematically removing evidence of their territories from public record for decades. Chapter 8. The Rational Explanation. Dr. Helen Forrester studies what she terms contemporary folklore manifestation, the way ancient myths adapt to modern contexts. These mountains inspire both awe and fear, Forrester explains. The fog, the ancient forest, they create perfect conditions for pareidolia. We're hardwired to perceive humanoid shapes, especially in conditions of low visibility and high stress. The similarity in reported descriptions across cultures and time periods, she argues, reflects universal human archetypes rather than consistent observation of an actual species. Small, powerful beings who punish humans for territorial transgression appear in folklore worldwide, she says. They represent our guilt about environmental destruction and our fear of being judged unworthy by more ancient entities. But when presented with physical evidence, unidentified organic compounds, audio recordings, consistent footprint castings, even Forrester admits the limitations of her theory. Science proceeds by investigating anomalies, not dismissing them, she says carefully. Sometimes the simplest explanation is that people are reporting what they genuinely experienced, and our current frameworks are insufficient to explain it. Chapter 9. The Threshold. They're getting bolder, says a lifelong hunter who would only identify himself as James. Coming closer to homes, testing our responses. He describes finding small footprints on his porch last winter, circling his house completely, examining every window, every potential entrance. His hunting rifles had been moved from their locked cabinet to the kitchen table, arranged in a cross pattern. The cabinet was still locked, he insists. The alarm never triggered, but they got in anyway. Others report increasingly complex communications, strange symbols carved into trees near property lines, arrangements of stones left in significant locations, doorsteps, children's windows, and well pumps. They're warning us, believes Margaret, an 82-year-old who has lived in a remote cabin since birth. There's a threshold of human presence they've tolerated. We've crossed it. She points to recent wildfires, flash floods, and landslides that have affected developed areas while somehow sparing the oldest, most remote communities. People call it luck or strange weather patterns, she says. It's not. They're reclaiming their spaces. Historical research confirms an unusual pattern of settlement abandonment dating back to the early 1800s. Entire communities that simply walked away from established homes, often following natural disasters that affected only their specific location. The oral histories tell of small figures seen watching from the forest edge in the days before each community's exodus. Chapter 10. Between Worlds. The Cherokee spoke of the Nunahai, immortal beings who could shift between our world and their own. Not ghosts, but entities who existed in a parallel reality that occasionally intersected with ours. Modern theoretical physics offers a framework for such possibilities. Brain theory, which suggests our universe might be just one membrane floating in a higher dimensional space, occasionally brushing against others. What if the Smoky Mountains contain such intersection points, areas where another reality bleeds into ours, allowing beings from that realm to cross over, beings who view these mountains as their ancestral territory? It would explain the consistent reports of gnomes appearing and disappearing impossibly, the ability to enter locked cabins without forcing entry, the strange properties of materials they leave behind. It would also explain why they're becoming more visible now. Perhaps something about our changing world, environmental degradation, electromagnetic pollution, shifts in the Earth's magnetic field, is causing these intersection points to widen. The boundaries between worlds may be dissolving, forcing contact between entities that have managed to avoid each other for centuries. Chapter 11. Why We Need Monsters. Whether the gnomes of the Smoky Mountains are flesh and blood cryptids, interdimensional visitors, or psychological projections, their persistence in our collective consciousness serves a purpose. In an age where satellite imagery has mapped every inch of our planet, these stories remind us of something essential. The wilderness remains fundamentally untamed. There are spaces beyond our control, beyond even our comprehension. The gnome encounters speak to our deepest ancestral memories of being vulnerable in wild places, of being the watched rather than the watchers. They invert the modern power dynamic, making humans once again subject to judgment by older, more elemental forces. Perhaps we need to believe that something ancient still guards the mountains, entities that hold us accountable for our treatment of these places. The gnome stories articulate an environmental conscience that transcends policy debates and economic calculations. The people who live closest to these mountains understand this instinctively. They leave offerings at certain trees, small bundles of tobacco, polished stones. They observe boundaries invisible on any official map. They speak respectfully of the hollow hills and misty valleys, not out of superstition, but from a wisdom that recognizes humans have never been the only intelligent presence in these ancient mountains, and that coexistence requires respect. So the next time you walk the remote trails of the Smokies, pay attention to that prickling sense of being watched. Notice the unnatural silence that sometimes falls in certain hollows. Consider what it might mean if the footprints you're following suddenly change from familiar boot treads to something smaller with 5 perfectly formed toes. And remember, in the oldest, deepest parts of these mountains, you are not the apex predator. You are merely a visitor in a territory far older than human memory, a territory where the small folk have watched and waited and judged for millennia. Some boundaries were never meant to be crossed. Some warnings should not be ignored. The gnomes of the Smoky Mountains aren't just folklore. They're the guardians of forgotten knowledge, that humanity's dominion over the wild places of this earth has always been an illusion. And illusions, like fog in the morning sun, eventually burn away. Subscribe to Noctivox, hit the bell, and join us every Saturday to uncover the hidden.